both a bit of an overview expectation session, and then you guys can talk about lectures, right? So you can also look at that. Christopher, you want to start? So yeah, please start. Yeah, that's a good point. All right, we're back. Is it already 8:20? That's fast. Okay. All right. Did everyone log in their preference? No, is everyone aware what they're supposed to talk about in their lecture session? Yeah. And is the schedule up to speed with respect to your allocations? Because that's what we use as a basis. So I may do some cross validation, but since you entered your name in your in arbitrary forms and ways, I'm not 100% sure if I catch that. But that's important that everyone has his name associated with the topic, of course, but more importantly, of course, that the time slots are well allocated. Last week I asked about if there's anyone who wants to slot in on the, what was that be? Not next week, but the week after 17th, I believe, of February. I haven't got any feedback, and if you're considering this, moving your own slot forward, most likely, then there's still an opportunity to do that. Otherwise, you get more stuff from me, and that may not be in your interest. But so since my Kahoot doesn't work out, evidently I'm not doing a good job here. So you want to rely on other students to do that. But if we can't fill this, I'll find a topic, of course, to cover. But other than this, just be mindful of this time slot in the schedule. Right? We expect a bit of mastery there, to just be ahead of the game and start planning your talks to a considerable extent. I believe the group that has the first talk is already onto it, at least being aware that they are talking next week, right? But since they're first comers, since they're taking the leap into the deep end of the pool, that is, of course, a different story. But you should take this up as an opportunity. So when it comes to structure, several people ask me about this, about particular coordination. You can pick the balance of theory and practice yourself. Evidently, it doesn't make sense to talk about the same theory again that has been talked about already, but you can link to it, right? So you can say either, hey, this links to this particular theory, or you talk about an aspect of the theory that hasn't been covered at depth.
Or discuss the challenges of applying the theory in
a
practical case.
Related, right? So that's the kind of thing. So there's a lot of space to do that. But fundamentally, I mean, it's finding and dissecting, ideally, examples of serious games that you find, right? So either based on literature, Serious Games Journal, Journal of Computer Games, all the resources that we link, but also tutorials, YouTube as far as I'm concerned, or personal experience and so on. Be out there, because serious games are everywhere. They're so diverse and unstructured. But your task is to take one, or multiple ideally, and relate it to some extent. That would be a starting point, particular for the first part of the session. The second part is then the specific paper. So there the focus is clearly a scientific one. You want to pick a paper of relevance that discusses serious games based on certain characteristics. We negotiate this, and everyone gets to read this thing before the corresponding sessions. All right. So if you guys are talking next week, we'll probably hand out the paper via GitLab over the next weekend, ideally around Friday or something like this. So you have the weekend to read this. Weekend. But it shouldn't be terribly hard to read a paper and reflect on it. I mean, if the group could push it forward to Thursday, then you would have one more day, of course. But it's also good that paper is kind of fresh when you think about it, and then bring your thoughts about it into the discussion. And we learn more about what kind of aspects we need to look at when we look at papers in particular that come out, right? Analytically, methodologically, from a structural point of view, presentation issues, and so on. So there's also this opportunity to learn about quality or lack of it in given papers.
And then hopefully what we covered the 2 days or 3 days of theory is that you have some heuristic devices for thinking about what you see and reflecting on the qualities and weaknesses and strengths of the paper. So it's not just you sit there with a description of a serious game, but you also have a kind of vocabulary and some ideas about what can be important objectives here.
That's right. So sometimes those games explicitly relate to theories, but most of the time they don't. So that's part of your game to figure out, perhaps, can you see that a theory relates or not, right? So sometimes it doesn't, because it's too far top, and it kind of still works, because, I don't know, based on experimental assessment. But then you probably want to dig deeper and see if the experimental assessments hold, right? We have, I think, a few good and bad examples of this in practice. Okay, that's it from my side. So just ensure that time slots and your group allocations are firm and fixed. So we really, don't forget anyone. No one should fall over. A little, Wild West approach to assigning responsibility here. And then, of course, the first group is on top of their things and should get in touch with me or Runa with respect to a specific paper in the area they want to discuss. And if they struggle ideally you should come forward with an example, otherwise we give you one. But generally having a bit more autonomy on your part is probably desirable.
More motivating.
Hopefully more motivating. You discuss something you want to discuss. But there's, in any case, in any of the subject, there is work out there, right? So in worst case, lift the abstraction level, look more at theories, for example, or whatever else, right? So in any case, I don't think in the past we had any case where people couldn't find a paper that wouldn't relate to their area. But it needs to be in a scientific realm. Again, look at the resources on the wiki. There's an ample set of general resources that are cross-cutting with respect to the area. Any questions before we return back to the education aspect? It's more like organizational, but just to be on top of things. I take this as a no. I don't know. It's usually that's a yes/no thing, and people say nothing. That's really the third answer. As a computer scientist, I can't deal with this.
What we should have done probably is we should have started this session with a Kahoot game, because the researchers behind Kahoot, they found that if you play Kahoot with music, you have more discussion in the classroom afterwards than if you play it without music or anything. So the fact that they have music, that will help.
So in this particular setting,
we should have started now.
But okay, that's one point. The other point is you probably should always have music with that bunch here. So they actually start this. Anyway, enough mucking around.
Yeah.
If there's questions, Discord or like.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some more on the balancing. So we sort of talked about the balancing, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. And it's not so theoretical, this part of it. We'll talk more about, in general, design choices and design challenges. So I'll look at three balances. One is to align instructional design with game design, because games for education should both be fun and a game, and it should help you learn. So we need to instructional design and game design. The other is competitive, like Kahoot, or more explorative games. And finally, do we consider it individuals only or group play, team playing together as a group? So these are the dimensions. So let's look at the balancing, the alignment of the learning objectives and the game objectives. So the game should be fun and motivating and be a good game, but the students should also learn what they're supposed to learn. We have this learning outcome, expected learning outcome. This is the object. The game should help you reach the outcome. So there's a paper from Shelton and Skorsky back in 2010 that talked about this kind of alignment. Games should not be just fun and engaging. When we see games for education, we always see, it's so fun and engaging that students can play. But that engagement should be translated into learning activities, should be translated into students learning more than they would have done otherwise. And learning experience. It should be engaging for the perspective of the learner, but successful. Because, as we remember from the constructive alignment, the learning outcomes, as instructors, we would like the students to reach the learning outcomes, and the activities, playing a game, should help students reach the learning outcomes. So, the game activities should be meaningful learning activities. Shouldn't just be fun to play, but there should be activities that one way or the other help the student get a better understanding. And if you think about Bloom, at various levels. Is it remembering? Is it be able to reflect and analyze? Is it be able to create? Where are we? And as Christopher was saying, maybe we are multiple places for various parts, so skills and competence that we are supposed to learn by playing this game. And in that same paper, they discussed three categories of misaligned games for education. So number one, this was very common in the beginning. This is a paper back in 2010 because there weren't so many educational games. So what happened is that, well, game is fun, so let's bring in a game like SimCity or Age of Empires. These are all games that probably have played all over it. Bring some of those games and then let's have a reflection afterwards and let the student learn. SimCity learns on social sciences. So you just take a game for entertainment, bring it in the classroom, and create learning activities around it. Nothing wrong per se, but the main challenge is that students are going to be involved in lots of activities that have no clear link to the learning outcome. So, of course, they can learn something, they'll always learn something, but the time they spend on playing the game may not be well spent according to getting to the learning outcome, because they need to spend a lot of time on things that are not skills and competencies that directly translate into the learning outcomes. I think it still happens, but it's much more before, but it still happens. And some are not, I mean, if you have some of those more construction games, if you like the students to be, I mean, if the learning outcome is about construction and the skills for design and construction, of course, that aligns very well. So you can think of ways in which this can be okay, but it's quite common that you just take it to a game and say, okay, now the students are going to find it fun, and then, by the way, they learn to communicate, they learn to collaborate. Yes, of course. I mean, any team activity, the students will learn to communicate and collaborate, but is the introduction of game bringing anything beyond just being a tool for communicating and interacting?
This isn't in the session. So I was working with a colleague before, and he was also his challenge was to run a paper which was basically about team effort and team building. And his idea for that paper was, well, screw all the theories, screw all the practice. Let's just go one round of paintball, playing in the field basically to do team building activities, and you have massively more. The benefit is the time is well spent, right? It's very targeted, very efficiency focused, and so on, as opposed to trying to bring in other concepts that emulate it, but just to have it in real time. So that really needs to correspond to the objective you want to achieve, right, at the core. And some aspects can really think outside of the box, right, as opposed to forcing it. And putting in those games may be really misleading. If you, for example, want to think about emergency planning, SimCity may seemingly be a sensible choice because there are perturbations based on earthquakes and all that kind of stuff. But there is no representation of this resilience or response system in itself. You just see, what does a catastrophe do to a city, and then you build it up again, right? So it doesn't really match well, and it's not.
Let's give it more better understanding, of the phenomenon that you are trying to
exactly. So I don't know. But it's something the education group can pick up, those kind of things, right? So that's entirely rated for you guys. You should probably read that paper and see what has been done on this area.
After that, yeah. That next one is where the games are introduced as a reward system in its own right. So if the kids are good, then they can play a game afterwards. So it's kind of a reward. So it's a means to end to reward correct behavior. So now if you work hard on this math test, you're going to use the time after the test to play the games. Or drill and skill games that will just be add-on as, okay, now that you learned and know the math, now we can also play the game and be the best, show that you're the best. And the third group would be games that distract from the learning activities. Either they are not fun at all. I mean, there are games that at least quite a lot of students won't find very engaging, or games that have lots of distracting gaming elements. My typical example here is many games are 3D games, and now VR games. And to me, with VR and 3D, you introduce a lot of new skills, like and the risk of sickness and everything. And if that's just to make it more fun, then that's not a good argument. I mean, if you are, there's one example for a group of levee inspectors. So in Netherlands, they have lots of levees to protect the land from flooding over. And they have inspectors that inspect the quality of the levees. And they have a game that will help the levee inspectors to better find and analyze. And in that case, it's a good alignment. So being able to navigate that space and be able to look at the levies and maybe even in 3D will drill them into something that is beneficial. But a math game, what should a math game be in VR? Okay, it's more fun, it looks more advanced, but this is a better math game. You will learn math better there. Unless we can say why, it's probably not a good idea. Question?
What an outcome of using VR or having again this ability also to reduce time to learn the skill?
That's a good question. So, what if VR or 3D games could they help reduce the time to learn? And if that's the case, obviously, yeah, we would like to make students learn more in the same amount of time. But some of the challenges here is that one, it takes a bit of time to learn to navigate, to learn to control, to learn to operate in that space. Now, if you include that the training time would be beneficial. And secondly, some kids, some students will be very experienced in there, others will not. So those with an experience already using those navigation tools will benefit. So it causes even a new level of inequality between students that has nothing to do with the scientific understanding, scientific level, but more about the experience, navigational experience. So, but we don't have the correct answers. So this needs to be discussed and analyzed, and we need to think about it. Okay, what are the benefits? What are the costs? What are the risks? What are the disadvantages? And who would our target group be? And how will it affect the group? So that's why we focus on the theories, because it's quite an analytical process. It's not just, okay, let's try and see what happens. I think we should try to avoid designing games that we know early on would not be the best for the group. Now, competition versus exploration. These are kind of my wordings, but it's from, so it's not, I don't have that same scientific reference that I have with the others, but this is aggregated from a number of papers, so I don't have an exact reference, but I can help you find some. Number one, human beings are seekers. I mean, if you think about our history, we needed to seek shelter, we needed to seek food. So the human brain actually is in an excited mode when we are in a seeking mode. That's a positive emotion linked to the act of seeking. So we are seekers. So exploration, and unfortunately, Christopher didn't get to go through the player types last week, because you have learned player types that could go into seekers, and of course then we are also social beings, motivated by play, and motivated to play, and to compete. This is something that we do seek, and some more than others. Some are more triggered by exploration, some are more triggered by competition than others. But I think what I would like to, since I'm not a typical competitive player, so if I play, that doesn't happen too often. I'm not naturally attracted to games that have a high emphasis on the competitive aspect. But exploration games, I favor more. So I'm probably more in that player type. And what I think, it seems like the designers of games seem to focus more on the competitive. So when you see games for education, you've seen that quite a lot of the competitive aspects are the ones that are being highlighted. And if you link this to the self-determination theory, what I think is interesting is that seeking is something that can help us in satisfying the needs for competence. So to be a seeker, you need to be an advanced seeker. So you have the competency of being able to seek very well and find things that others won't find, or something that is rewarding in itself. And autonomy. So you seek because you like to, and you like to discover. While play is more actually related to the relatedness. So play is something we do for social bonding more than because it's learning, just learning. Because just for learning, then the seeking exploration may be as good as competing and playing. But when it comes to social bonding, playing together and competing, is a way to create this relatedness.
Just a question then. So are we then, if you look back at the goal achievement theory, right? So where we have this differentiation,
Mastery or performance.
and performance. So you're suggesting that performance has more social component, whereas mastery is more like
No. I mean that's kind of orthogonal. You can have seekers that are very driven for being the best and have performance goals, even if you are seeking. Okay. And you can have competitors that are very socially competitive players and like that because they may have a mastery goal as well because they like to and they see their skills being good with others. So they do best when they work with others. So one way to get the mastery is to collaborate with others. So I don't think they are becoming no. It's there are some relations here, and my message is that when we design, we have a number of gaming elements, and we need to think about the totality. We need to think about what type of players, what type of, and I don't know if you're going to be talking about player types, but what characteristics, what would be the benefits, what would be the challenges introducing these various elements. So it's not like, okay, this is a game, we always have to have a competition, we always have to have a scoreboard, we always have to have rewards. Not necessarily. So think about the larger picture and think about what are the learning or the objectives, learning outcomes, expected learning outcomes, and how can we design and even if we do competition, maybe we don't have only competition. So we need to think about when we introduce something, it's not just because it's fun, it's engaging. That's too simple answer. We need to have a good understanding of what it will give that we wouldn't get otherwise. And the final one is individual versus group. Now, if you say that play is mostly for relatedness and for social interaction, then should we play individually or in groups? And it's interesting that if you look at across, not just for learning, but across, if you look at groups, teams, rather than individuals. So we have a number of cases where we suggest methodologies that involves the group, because a group generally performs better than individuals. And group activities that require individuals to contribute. So if you think about, I don't know if you've been involved in the brainstorming, and we know that brainstorming is not a good way to come up with many good ideas, because brainstorming is good at coming up to a consensus to one idea, but not to have many ideas. We all think that brainstorming is good for getting many ideas, but it is not. It's good to have a quick consensus to some good ideas, a few in number, and maybe not the best ones. A group process where the individuals need to contribute. And that one is sort of that is a nominal group process. If you look it up, nominal group process is a brainstorming process where the individuals first have to come up with all the ideas. Then they throw all the ideas on the table, and everybody look at them, and everybody go back and say, okay, these are the ones I think are more important. And then they go back into group setting. You go from individual setting to group setting, back and forth. They have the individuals being responsible, and then you have a group to work together on that. And the think, pair, share. Have you heard about the think, pair, share? So in teaching, so if I would like to have a discussion or have something, I would like each one of you to think about it first, and then you talk to somebody next to you to discuss your thoughts, to match it up to the other one, and then the groups to share their ideas. So individuals, and then the group activity. Team-based learning. In team-based learning, have you ever experienced in team-based learning?
We all have experts in teamwork this semester.
But team-based learning, that methodology, because that methodology, you have it. Yeah. So in that methodology, so you have a test, you have the individual assessment test, and then you do the group assessment test. And the group assessment test is always better than the individual. Yeah. So it's the same thing. So when we design games, why don't we think about this balance as well? In a game, would we always have to have individual games? And if we have group games, do we require the individuals to also participate individually, be individually responsible for some activities. So that's, I think, is an interesting and an important balance as well. What do we design in these games for the social, the interactive, the joint activities, and what do we design for individuals? Yes. Now, let's reflect a little bit. And this is a different one. You don't have to type in as much. You just have to think.
Is it the same code?
The same code. So, balancing. Is fun to play more important than learning from the game? We talk about serious games now for education. And good games, do you feel that they need some element of competition? And individual play is more rewarding than team play. Strongly disagree? Strongly agree.
Very good.
I think I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna skip the pair, but let's share a little bit ideas. Some of those who have say that the time to play, we strongly disagree with this. Somebody said towards strongly. Share why you think you disagree with the fact that it's more important to be fun. You know. Yep.
Well, if it's not fun, then you're not gonna learn, I think.
So you're this side and
I was 3 or
fun to
4.
play is more important, so you
No.
strongly agree.
I'm like in the middle because it can be too fun, but it has to be some fun.
But there were some answers down here and up here, so I could find more of the extremes. Some of you had either highly towards agree or highly towards disagree. I'd like to hear. Okay, I think this means that there are some. Okay. Cool. Share? No motivation to share here? Yeah.
Well, in serious games, the end goal is learning. So if you make it too fun, it will be distracting. And for instance, if there's a high score and that's like the competitive part of it, you may be too involved in getting a high score rather than actually thinking about what you're reading or learning.
Yeah. So that also relates to the alignment. So if your high score means that you learn a lot, then it's easier to say that okay, then in that case it's better. But if I mean, I don't know. Have you talked about gaming systems? I mean, you could always game systems. I mean, if you understand how the scoring works, you could always get good scores, or you can often get good scores without necessarily having the skills. We're talking about our university system as a game, so in this life, so you can game that thing as well. So, right. Yep. What about elements of competition? Do we need or we don't need? It seems to be evenly spread out. Somebody says that we don't need competition.
It really depends. So the same with the global system also that we have good cases for both. So you need to look at what the actual goal of learning is. To say that this goal is mostly for competition for more individual team play. But it's both.
Absolutely, but what I'm seeing here is that there are some who tend to think that competition is more important, and some think that competition is less important. So that's what I'm trying to call it.
I think for me, competition is less important, because you explain the performance and mastery stuff. I think there will be some competition. People tend to pay attention to their performance rather than mastery. And if it's a good game enough, you don't have to compete.
Oftentimes, if you look at serious games and then they have some Facebook button on there or something like this, I always feel it's like a way of cheating out, right? So they don't know what to do, add yet another social feature to it. So I think oftentimes the quality lies, precisely as you say, in having a really well-designed game that doesn't need to rely on it, but can use it on top of it. Sure, but it can sometimes be just the shortcut, basically. Individual play versus team play. Seems to be a little bump here on the individual.
Yeah, that really depends on one hand on the game that is playing. If team play is like everybody can contribute the same amount, or if that's like staged in some way, and on the other hand, like if you really achieve something great in the game individually, that's also really good. But if it's too hard to achieve without team play, it really depends on game design and how the reward system works. But I don't think that you can say that in general, because it's also really dependent on the person that is playing. For me, it's always more fun to do something with the team and to learn something with the team than to do it alone. It just kind of need social interaction. So that's really depending on the person that's voting for it.
Yeah, it's kind of echoing that if you play as a team, you usually get like a second level of feedback. So whether it's like your teammates being like, "Good job, that was a good idea," and then putting that forward and then winning the competition or whatever it is on top of that, you kind of get like an extra level of feedback to either be reassuring or helpful.
Because there is some research that shows actually that the performance goal you're talking about is less pronounced if you have a team, because it's then much more about the team play. So they have a mastery. It's easier to have a mastery goal in a team competition than in an individual competition. So it works differently in terms of the dynamics. Yeah.
I also think that if you have a team, there's also like a negative downside of maybe some people in a team being very dominating. And then maybe some of the others don't even really get anything out of the game because they didn't really participate.
Yeah, that's with all teamwork. That's why I favor in the master courses when you have team projects, you have an individual for example. I like to talk to the individuals and I like to hear about the team performances. So that's good. Good. I didn't know what to expect, but what I was hoping for with this diagram is that you could see that there is a distribution. This one seems to be the more evenly distributed one, but these ones seem to have preferences. So that's something to think about when we design games. People are different. So ideally, when we develop games for education, either we need to develop 2 or 3 games for the same purpose, or you need to try to make the game so that it will engage different types of students. But I think it's also the context, right? If you play, for example, an emergency response team game, I'm not sure if fun is the term to use in that context, right? So, if you have those panels, a serious setup, and you kind of want to train them.
I think even the military, when the Norwegian army goes to US to have a war game, I think they found it fun in the sense that it is engaging and it's
It's the work.
Very engaging.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
okay. I can see that.
But it's they are a state of having fun, professional fun. Yeah. Now before we go, yeah.
Good response to that also in that there's also some fun making mistakes. Doing silly stuff. So when you have, for instance, the voice immersion games, you can do simulating work. You can also sort of take a step back and consider the silliness of what you're doing also. And that is, so it's,
Right.
you have periods of fun, but
Yeah.
also dial back and do the serious stuff.
So you think about the reflection aspect, right? So now let's look at what we did, and then you laugh about it, kind of thing. So I can see, that's it. Especially if it's learning cycle.
So I think let me see. That's it. I think I have a few more slides, and hopefully just give you before that.
Yeah, just to the last point, you could also rephrase fun to liking what you're doing, more or less, maybe more appropriate, like a sort of
Enjoyable.
Yeah.
Very enjoyable. Yeah. I don't have too many minutes, of course. That would be a surprise. But let's just very quickly go through a paper that you can pick up and read yourself as well. That talks about how do we evaluate, how do we measure the quality of games for education. And I think that some of this is education specific, but some of it would be to other serious games as well. Because, I mean, engagement, motivating is just one aspect. If you look here in this paper, they have this table. Is it readable? Yeah, you can see almost, can you? So the first is the learning outcome. And they looked at 287 papers, and 78% talked about the learning and measured the learning. Well, the two things that we may look at here would be here, established instruments. Please be aware that for quite a number of things you would like to measure, there may already be questionnaires, instruments, and rather than coming up with your own questionnaire, coming up with your own ways of measuring engagement and user quality, try to see if there are already some established instruments. But you can see many times the researchers develop their own instruments, their own ways to measure, by questionnaires, by some measures. So one, we don't have too much time, so I'm not going to go into all details, but one is about the learning, and then the affective elements, meaning engagement, motivation, their attitude, self-efficacy, the emotional anxiety, looks at the affective, meaning the emotional elements. And out of those, 61% of the papers actually looked at affective, and of course, engagement is and motivation is the one that typically most papers look for here. And you can see there are some instruments, established instruments that you can use already for engagement. 69% use that. Behavior, participation, how much they interact, how much they collaborate, how much they reflect. What is the outcome of their actual behavior? What about the design? Course design, the course structure, the resources, overall design for the whole course. Technology. Ease of use, of course. How easy to adopt. How easy it is to use for students of different handicaps or different challenges in terms of using technology. The teaching method itself, feedback, teaching strategies, teaching quality. Presence. Just 20% of or 5% of the papers looked at social presence or being part of a community, looked at that aspect. And finally, the institutional environment itself. So, again, I like to think of it this way, when we start to design, if you think about the constructive alignment, say this is the learning outcome, then we say, okay, how are we going to assess that? How are we going to assess? And if you want to design a game, then how are we going to assess the quality of the game? And think about that early on. And then we can and think in terms of more than just whether it's engaging, whether it's easy to use, and whether it's learning. Those are just three of the top level parameters. And then at the lower level, you have many more constructs or metrics that you can use. And also, keep in mind, as I said, that there are instruments that you can use. So rather than trying to come up with your own, use an existing instrument. That's it.
I think this is really helpful. I mean, this also from an analytical perspective. If you look, I mean, sure, it has a bit of a twist to education, but if you remove the extreme cases such as pedagogy and teaching, it's kind of a very generic framework.
But then you would have, rather than this, you would have health benefits. Of course, it's the same thing.
So,
or political benefits or whatever. Yeah.
abuse, if you like, the structure that is proposed in such papers to analyze your own papers, right? So it would be really, I actually would be quite keen to see if in your respective disciplines you figure out, affect is very important in certain areas, whereas, for example, technological aspects are much more pronounced in certain other domains, right? So using such a scaffolding may actually be quite helpful to categorize where you think the weight in the papers you have seen in your respective topic area is actually important. It's quite interesting. Second specific comment on presence, right? This could be a justification for using VR technology, though, right? Because that's the main purpose of it, to have an as-if behavior, right? So as if we were in the same room, but we're not, right? So that's also something to keep an eye on here. Sometimes there's an overlap between tech and psychological effects in particular here. And presence is the classical one when it comes to fancy tech, XR, AR, and all that. Anyway, there's two thoughts. But so I think it's very helpful, this framework. So bear that in mind, in addition to the ones that you have from the game design perspective and the A-win and so on. But I think that's probably really worthwhile bearing in mind. It's very recent, so it's very interesting.
It is very recent.
Have a look at
and you find others that have similar overlapping and some are different. So you find the number of these papers. So you can also just go into there and try to. But since this is a very recent one, I was thinking that it will aggregate results from some of the other ones as well. So. Now, reflections. Final thoughts. Now, time is out, but I hope I can keep you another couple of minutes or so. First, let's go back and reflect on the Kahoot experience. Any thoughts without any introduction? What do you think about starting with the Kahoot today? Both at the meta level and at the concrete level. Yeah?
The sound is very distracting.
Sound, the audio.
Okay, yep, good.
I was completely unable to answer a couple of answers just because I was so distracted.
So annoying.
Who shares that view? Just for instance.
That sound is
Yeah.
distracting.
Yeah. Just waiting
Right.
for
Because as I said, the developers, they did a study that showed that students thought sound was that was low grade stuff. The sound was positive for two reasons. Number one, to create that kind of good emotion, and secondly, to have more talk and interaction in the classroom afterwards.
But I mean, it really depends on of course, the players, but also the nature of the questions, right?
Yeah,
Because those were really mastery questions kind of stuff. It was not, simple, the obvious question. You really need to reflect, and having this jumping monkey in your head is really not helpful. So I share Björn's view. Hadn't I known the questions, I would be equally confused and would not be able to focus. So it really depends who you run, right?
And that's why I turned the audio up to give you that kind of feeling for it. Yeah. Other comments about the Kahoot? Yeah.
I think Kahoot rewards answering fast and too much. For example, if you are not completely sure, instead of making an educated guess, you are more able to just make a quick guess instead.
So that is now I can start talking about the theory I haven't covered yet. Have you thought about the system 1 and system 2 thinking?
Yeah.
System 1 being the automized, and system 2 meaning that you need to reflect and be cognitive. Yeah, Kahoot is definitely looking into system 1. So anything that you have learned to automate, you can be fast. But if you need thinking and reflection, this is not the way to go for it. So linking score to time is generally not a good idea if you would like to have reflection. That's why in the Mentimeter, I gave you whatever time you needed.
I would have to limit if I did that in a classroom with more time constraints. But so again, yeah. So stressing the players on time is generally not a good idea, because first of all, you're gonna be seeing what they have optimized. So for that purpose, I mean, if you like to have a driving simulation later to see how quickly and accurately drivers would avoid a moose jumping into the road, then obviously time will be important aspect. But if it's not, then it might actually hurt hurt the ability to reflect. That's why I also have the Mentimeter, where you have more of the time you can reflect and think and formulate, which is a different type of interaction. Any other comments about the Kahoot? You have played Kahoot before? In an education setting or just for fun otherwise? In an education setting?
Both.
Both, yeah.
Probably too much already.
I never use it in when I'm teaching. I use Mentimeter, but never Kahoot. I don't like the audio, and I don't like the time aspect, but
It's sometimes really good for guessing games, right? If you guess percentages of market share distributions and things like that, where it's not really important about the, where it's more like ballpark kind of thinking. So then it's good to.
I mean, it's also good if you have, as an instructor or in a game, if what you would like to achieve is a change in behavior, if that's the purpose of the game, then you would like to identify what is the base behavior, and in that case, time can be the thing to do. You have questions in which you answer so quickly, so you can't reflect. You just answer what is it from your gut feeling, and then the rest follow up will be okay. Starting questioning, why was this not so good, or why is this good, and what can you do? So it can be, but then again, we use it for a certain purpose, not because it's fun, since the one who is faster wins. Then of course he knows most because he's the faster one. No, it's about much more than just how much he knows. Yeah, and I also like the feedback. Thank you for actually doing the Mentimeter and the Kahoot, because it's valuable feedback, and as I said, it's by design. Still sorry that you're disappointed that we weren't giving you more practical examples.
They're coming.
But you are providing them to us, and we can help you. And hopefully we have helped you widen the perspective and see a little bit of what are the ways of thinking, what are the theories and structures and ways of thinking that could be helpful. So that was the aim. Thank you. Further questions or comments?
You broke them.
Of course, yeah. I mean, time breaks people.
Ja, jag tänkte bara